Know that enough is enough and stop. And then move on to whatever comes next. And you will have peace in that. This is Tao Te Ching chapter 9. I think I'll read Stephen Mitchell's interpretation, and I'll also read Red Pine's translation. Here is Red Pine's translation of chapter 9 of the Tao Te Ching. Instead of pouring in more, better stop while you can. Making it sharper won't help it last longer. Rooms full of treasure can never be safe. The vanity of success invites its own failure. When your work is done, retire. This is the way of heaven. Here's Stephen Mitchell, same chapter. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Breaking it down sort of to its essence, this chapter is on the virtue of knowing when it's time to stop. It's a recognition that more does not equal better. There's a quote by Epicurus, there is never enough for the man to whom enough is too little. So I'm going to go line by line and give you these sort of little phrases that I felt summed up different sections, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into it. So where it says, fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill, keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt, those are Stephen Mitchell's lines. I mean, it's fairly straightforward in saying that too much is a waste. If you keep going after more and more and more, you're really just overdoing it. My mother used to tell me, leave well enough alone. That while I was erasing some piece of a drawing that I was doing as a kid until I wore a hole in the paper, you know. We'll get kind of a little bit more into that in a moment. The next lines say, chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Or Red Pine says, rooms full of treasure can never be safe. If we're really worried about holding on to whatever it is we feel we've gained, then that builds anxiety in us. But I think there's a more fundamental thing to understand, which is that nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. We have to let go to find peace. And part of our problem is that we desperately want things to last. The next line says, care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. That's Mitchell. And then Red Pine says, the vanity of success invites its own failure. These two lines I feel are quite different. The rest of them I think are very, very similar. These two lines actually, to me, give a slightly different message, although they do have some overlap. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. It doesn't mean, of course, that we shouldn't care about what anybody thinks. There are people who deserve our respect and who we should defer to at times, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes we need people to show us where we're, off the mark. But this is more about caring too much about everybody's approval. When you do that, then your actions end up being only motivated by what you think they want from you. And this becomes a kind of prison. It becomes a kind of enslavement, if you will. Vanity of success invites its own failure. There's a saying, nothing fails like success. It's very easy as you have success, even in small ways, to start to believe your own legend, start to kind of feel like you're big and important stuff. Pride goeth before the fall, that whole thing. The phrasing that I have here is, if you forget your limits, you overstep. And that is more to the line of the vanity of success invites its own failure. And then the line I have for caring about people's approval will make you their prisoner. I say humility is freedom and prevents the fall, right? The fall that pride brings. How is humility freedom? When you're humble, you're not so concerned with people thinking highly of you. You're not so concerned with keeping up some kind of appearance with impressing anyone, because you understand that, you're just a person and that everybody has their limitations, everybody has their faults, everybody has things that they need to work on. That's something to think about, perhaps in balance of the notion that we need to accept ourselves. At the same time, don't accept yourself so much that you think you're hot stuff, you know? Do your work, then step back, the only path to serenity. Kind of simple in a way, like my mother told me, it's know that enough is enough. And stop. And then move on to whatever comes next. And you will have peace in that. It's really hard to do that sometimes when we have this vision for what we want, especially when we're close to it, right? This is the issue with the vanity of success. It's going well, and then we push it a bridge too far. And then the whole thing can fall apart. In always seeking more, when that more is aimed towards external things, whatever, be it wealth, status, fame, influence, power, you can never satisfy that external measure. Because whenever you achieve something, we've talked about this before, something called hedonic adaptation, it's just basically the concept that in this context, you want something. It becomes your desire, your goal, maybe even your obsession. And you go after it. And then you get it. And then maybe you feel that moment of great satisfaction, but it dims quickly because now you have it and it becomes integrated into your state of normalcy. And so now you have to find the next thing. Desiring more always desires more. This is Epicurus's point. There is never enough for the man to whom enough is too little. Dakuan, in his translation, he says that knowing when to stop pursuing something not only applies to wealth, status, and influence, but also to knowledge, virtue, art, and ability. In other words, it's not just about knowing when to stop pursuing the wrong things, but you can even go too far pursuing the right things. There's a quote by Ian McGilchrist, the author of The Master and Its Emissary, about the divided brain. But I love this quote. He says, "There is nothing so good that more and more keeps getting better," which applies to this. And he also says within the same quote, "and nothing so bad that a little can't do some good." So just a little something to chew on there. The idea of filling your bowl until it spills over, the idea of sharpening your knife until it blunts, the notion that we can work something so much, try to improve something so much that we spoil it. This kind of speaks to the sort of obsession of perfectionism. This is my mom's whole leave well enough alone thing, and I couldn't until there was a literal hole through my drawing because I kept erasing and redrawing. When we obsess over something, that's what happens. We end up spoil what we would have perfected. And we also miss the forest for the trees. We're so hyper-focused on it. That sort of intenseness of focus abstracts it from the context that gives it meaning. It just becomes sort of its own thing, and we miss the bigger picture. We're too close. And in doing that, we often misuse, abuse, or make an error in the pursuit of improvement. Improvement almost becomes improvement for its own sake. And that usually doesn't end up ending well in the sense of external things that we pursue. And then the idea of, hoarding treasure, that's obviously a form of grasping too tightly. Nothing is forever, and that's wherein lies its value, its true value. So when we try to hold on to wealth, when we try to hold on to some form of a status, it doesn't have to be some major recognition. It can be our status within the eyes of a specific individual, or even within our own eyes. When we try to cling to life too much, all of these things will mainly just end up building anxiety because we cannot fight that force of time, of entropy, of ultimate ending. So by concerning ourselves so much with losing what we've gained and trying to hold on to it, we create our own anxiety. And letting go, allowing the next phase of our time, the next season to take shape and embracing the change, being fully present for it, that's where we can experience the peace that surpasses understanding. Surpasses understanding because it doesn't come from outside stuff. It comes from inside stuff. It's the peace of having let go of all of that. It doesn't mean we don't appreciate the things that are good when they come. It doesn't mean that things when they're bad don't make us sad. It means that that is not the source of our sense of peace that comes from our own internal balance. To abide in wuji gives us a higher orientation, a higher aim than whatever's going on at the specific moment. If we don't have that, if we don't have something to aim for that subsumes and supersedes any specific situation that we're dealing with, then we become enthralled to the results and events of those circumstances. If we can focus on something that transcends all of that, that can give us a way of finding balance in all circumstances, something like our North Star, our internal compass. But we want to abide in its center so that we can see all possibilities, and that's what wuji is. Think about it in our form. When we're doing the form, we have all of these changes. We're turning this way, moving that way, the arms change directions, we're stepping in all kinds of directions, but ultimately, within all of that, the goal is always to be returning to and maintaining wuji. And the way we move, the silk reeling movements, are the act of returning to wuji in the wake of whatever movement or intention we're doing. And if you get that, then you can almost think that the point of whatever's going on, the deepest point, or the highest one, however you want to phrase it, is returning to wuji, maintaining wuji in all circumstances. And what will unfold from that is the most balanced, authentic thing you can do. And that will always tell you when you might reach too far, because you'll feel the loss of that balance coming in. You'll be like, okay, that's too yang or that's too yin. I need to stop and just let things go. So that's chapter 9. Thank you, guys.